Thank you, V, and appreciate that word of welcome. It's always a pleasure to speak here at the TechWell conferences. How's everyone doing so far? All right, we got a concluding talk. We have about 50 minutes. Is this timer going to start anytime soon? How do I start the timer? Okay, there we go. Very good. Okay, so you got that introduction from Lee, and I appreciate that. Just a couple of other things that I wanted to tell you. I've actually been around for 25 years. It's been quite a while. Started out as a programmer, an engineer, project manager, and such. And over those last 25 years in the industry, I have had the experience and the privilege of working with a number of methodologies. So ranging in the old days, that is 15, 20 years ago, with waterfall, the so-called SDLC, to CMMI, some of you might have heard of CMMI, Capability Maturity Model, to Rational Unified Process, and then as the years advanced, about 15 years ago, moved into extreme programming, one of my first experiences with Agile methods, and then on to Scrum and Kanban. And over the last couple of years or so, I've been doing some work with the Scaled Agile framework and large-scale Scrum. So these are the scaling techniques that we're going to talk about today. The topic for my talk today is Scaling Agile, a Guide for the Perplexed. I'm going to attempt to convey some of my experience over the last year and a half, decade and a half, and help understand how we can take Agile from one or two teams that you might have in your companies and scale it up to multiple teams, multiple programs. So to help me do that, I'm going to ask you guys for a quick poll. I'd like you to self-assess on a scale of 1, 2, and 3. If you have 6 months or less experience, that's a novice level, you're level 1. Let's see a show of hands for the level 1s. Okay? About a little less than a third of the audience. Thank you. Level 2 is intermediate level if you have 6 to 18 months of experience with Agile. Level 2s. And level 3 is experts. Folks who've been doing it for a while. Lots of folks in the back. Okay, so many of you are probably teachers, instructors. Well, glad to have all of you guys here. And for the level 1s, you know that Agile methods there's no single term called Agile, but we have a distribution of methods that you see up on the screen, ranging from Scrum to extreme programming. And version 1, the tool vendor, you might have seen their booth over there, they run a survey, and they say that, well, Agile methods are going to shake out this way. The majority of folks are doing Scrum. Some are mixing Scrum and XP at the team level, and that's a Scrum XP hybrid. And then a smattering of others are doing Kanban, and some folks are combining Scrum with Kanban, and that's called ScrumBan. Our job is to figure out how to take those methods at the team level and scale them up across multiple teams. So I'm assuming that by virtue of the fact that you're in this conference, you're interested in this topic. But I have to ask all of us, myself included, this question: why should we scale? So let me ask you guys, why should we scale? I'm sorry? Not meeting their needs?
We like it, we want more of it.
We like it, we want more of it. And by getting more of it? Involving more of our organization. So what we want to do is to establish a rationale for scaling Agile. We like it, it's working well on the team level, we want more of it, we want to involve more of our organization, and then that will be our goal. So if we establish that we want to scale Agile, and that's going to be a business rationale, then the question becomes, how do we jumpstart that scaling effort? There are some scaling frameworks out there, the Scaled Agile framework, Disciplined Agile Delivery, and SAFe and such, but there are certain things that we can do immediately, and that's what we call a jumpstart to that scaling. And so I'm going to cover an overview, this step called Assess, Align, and Accelerate, and then we'll talk about some reflection and progression, and I'm going to leave you with some summary and next steps. Does that sound like a good plan? All right, let's do it. So why scale Agile? We like it, we want more of it. Well, it turns out that there's a guy called Steve Denning, and Steve Denning is on the board of the Scrum Alliance. There's the Agile Alliance, there's the Scrum Alliance. Steve Denning is one of these tech and Agile gurus. He's on the board of the Scrum Alliance, and he writes. He's a prolific writer. He blogs for Forbes.com. And in a recent publication, this is from the PMI, the Project Management Institute, Steve Denning says, successful organizations are able to pivot and implement quickly in order to achieve competitive advantage. So lots of sort of business terms over here, but this basically says that if we have agile teams and we like it and it's working well, if we scale it to the larger organizations, then our organizations themselves can pivot. What does pivot mean? Pardon? Change direction. Change directions in response to changing business conditions. So our organizations can now be able to pivot and change direction and implement quickly and to give us competitive advantage. So our first job is to look and say, who's actually done this? So I'm going to share a couple examples with you that with companies that have done this at the enterprise level or in the organization level. Here is a slide, and we have some folks who have been involved with this particular initiative over at Nationwide Insurance. Here's a slide that shows us that there has been an enterprise transformation going on at Nationwide for the past 6 or 7 years. They started out with a few teams, and they grew to multiple teams. And today, believe it or not, they have over 150 teams practicing Agile within an overweening framework of Lean on top of that. You go to Columbus, Ohio, Des Moines, Iowa, mostly in Columbus, you're going to find this center. This is called the Application Development Center. And you have an entire layout of multiple floors in downtown Columbus in a high-rise building with all of these teams doing Agile methods. 150 teams. Well, that sounds good. Well, what is the advantage of getting these guys all doing Agile? Well, on a few programs, they've been able to achieve remarkable speed. So take a look at that slide on the left-hand side on the top. There's one program that went for 7 months. It had 27 teams. 7 months, 27 teams working in parallel on a single program without a single defect in production, Sev 1 or Sev 2 defect. So that level of high quality at the program level gives us an immense amount of speed. You see the rest of the stuff going on in Nationwide. I'm going to come back and talk to you a little more about this. This has been a multi-year journey. In the public sector, we see some other examples. Anybody here from government, quasi-government, do work with the government? Nobody? You're all in the pool? Okay, so it's folks in the government. Okay, so within the federal government, believe it or not, there's been an initiative called the 25-point program. There's a gentleman by the name of Vivek Kundra. He was the federal CIO. He's since moved on. But he instituted something called a 25-point program. And in his 25-point program, that was specifically targeted towards large-scale programs within the government, he said, you must, or you should be looking at implementing iterative and incremental methods, which is essentially Agile. Several years later, the cost savings are turning out to be the billions of dollars. That's billions with a B. Closer to home, more recent time, there is one of the agencies, government agencies that we've been working with recently. This is the National Geospatial Agency, or NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency to be precise. You see a picture of it at the bottom left over there. And the NGA has been implementing Agile methods across their entire organizations, not just IT, with the goal of what they call agency agility. And this is primarily, they do classified stuff in support of national security. Primarily, they're looking at implementing agility so that they can respond to fast changing conditions and provide intelligent information to other agencies in the intelligence community. So NGA is using Agile to become Agile in itself as an organization. So whether it's the private sector or the public sector, it turns out that any organization can expect to encounter barriers, right? You don't go from one way of doing things, like the waterfall old way of doing things, to a new way of doing things without some sort of journey and some sort of hurdles along the way. Would you agree with that? Yeah? Well, what kind of hurdles do you think we can expect? Here we go, our friends from version 1 again. In their State of Agile Development Survey, version 1, of course, the tool company, but they have the State of Agile Development Survey. Every year, they look at a number of things in the Agile field. And this is, I think they're up to their 10th year, and these are some of the results from that survey. They're telling us what are the barriers to further Agile adoption. in these organizations. On the extreme left, you see that the highest or the most significant barrier to further agile adoption is the ability to change organizational culture. And it has been every year of that 10-year survey. It hasn't changed. Organizational culture is hard to change. So that sounds okay. We kind of understand, yeah, it's changed. What specifically about organizational culture is hard to change? There's one thing in particular that affects us, and there's an obscure theory, law called Conway's rule. Who's heard of Conway's rule? I'm sure some of those level 3s have heard of Conway's rule. Yeah. Conway's rule says if you have a process, and if you've had waterfall process for how long? How long have you been doing waterfall? 40 years, 50 years, yeah. Requirements analysis, development, production, test. Waterfall process, Conway's rule says your process will be mirrored in your organizational structure. If we have a waterfall process, and we've had that for a number of decades, then we have a siloed organization. So we can go in and we can put in agile teams over there, but our agile teams are now operating within a larger siloed organization, a larger ecosystem. So as we look to scale, we see interesting things happening, right? Here's something that happens. Agile teams are supposed to be small. How small are they supposed to be? Yeah, 7 plus or minus 2, 5 to 9 people, sounds good. You guys all got your ScrumMaster certification. And put your hands up if you got a ScrumMaster certification. There you go, all you guys passed. However, in a waterfall silo, that wonderful Scrum team that's supposed to be 7 plus or minus 2, how many people does it end up being? 50, well, hopefully not 50, I'll die if I see something like that. But it's probably, I've seen 30, 25, 30. Do you have a team of 50 people? An agile team? How agile can we be if you have a team of 50 people? 40 people in there? 4 people, so there you go. That's probably, we can talk about that. That's actually better. What you don't want is a team, a so-called agile team that's 50 people. Would we agree with that? All right, here's another symptom. A separate QA silo. You know, agile teams are supposed to be integrated across the disciplines. We're supposed to have analysts working with developers, working with testers. But we see this situation where the testers, the QA folks are separate but equal. They're banished into the outer darkness. Who's got testers banished into the outer darkness? All right, there you go. Give them a hand. Let's welcome them back. We need to take in some virtual hugs. All right. So we don't want a QA silo because that's just, again, regressing us back to waterfall, right? Multitasking, another thing that happens where folks are supposed to be working on 1 or 2, right? Scrum says, put that product backlog together, keep your team focused on the product backlog. Well, our organization doesn't allow us to do that because they still have other responsibilities and people end up working on multiple projects. Studies show about 3 to 5 projects. Anybody working on more than 2 projects on a Scrum team? There you go. So these are all symptoms of our dysfunction. So what can we do? What can we do about this? Let's turn to John Kotter, who's from Harvard Business School, and he, of course, is an organizational change management guru. And let's look at John Kotter, and he's talking about the evolution of the 21st century organization.
Hello, I'm John Kotter, and I'm here to talk to you about winning in a faster and faster moving world. A world where more threats are coming at us from all kinds of different unpredictable directions, but also in which there are more windows of opportunity, opening and closing faster than ever. I am convinced that we've crossed a line in which the old methods that we've used to deal with this no longer work. And I want to talk to you briefly about what seems to work in this faster and faster moving world. To understand this, I found you need to understand how organizations naturally evolve over time and how that has gotten us to where we are now. All organizations start with a structure that kind of looks like a dynamic solar system or a molecule. Their advantage is that they can be very, very fast, very agile. They can run around existing competition. They start with a set of entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter if they're trying to make a new type of microchip or a new type of chocolate chip cookie, they attract people who work on various initiatives. It could be anything, playing around with crazy ideas, talking to customers, doing things with alloys. And they can drop those initiatives and start new ones. If they're successful, though, they have to be able to make and ship a product or deliver a service. And as soon as that happens, you start to see growing something that we would recognize. It looks more like a hierarchy, it has jobs, it has processes, and if they continue to be successful, of course, it's that part that has to grow. And it grows, and for a brief time, you've got both systems that tend to be hooked together well because of the entrepreneurs who play a part in both. And sometimes the old-timers that have jobs over at one side and they're still in that entrepreneurial system. But as successful as they are, you know what part grows, and it grows. And at a certain point, it doesn't like the old entrepreneurial, unpredictable, whipping around system, and so it systematically eliminates it. And you end up with what we all know, typical modern organization. Now, in a slow enough moving world, that can work fine, and it does. But as the world starts to speed up, it doesn't. And so what smart people do is they augment it. They add strategic planning committees, they hire strategic consultants, they put together interdepartmental task forces or project management organizations to first create and then to execute strategies. And if this is done well, it works up to a point. But as the world speeds up more and more, it doesn't. So they continue along this same path. It happens naturally. You add another committee, you add work streams, you add more strategy pieces. And after a while, all of this addition actually slows you down, and the whole thing starts to sink into the muck, which obviously does not win today. It raises the question of what could win today, and actually, you just saw it a minute ago. Now, let's rewind the tape. Okay, start there, go back some more. Now stop. There it is. Something that can be reliable and efficient now, and can be fast and agile in helping you maneuver through.
All right, something that can be fast and reliable, reliable and efficient now, and fast and agile in the future. So our challenge now is to take our agile teams, we have a few agile teams, we understand that we have to adjust some of the elements of our organizational structure, and we need to, quote unquote, jumpstart our scaling, right? So I'm going to share with you a story from a company. This company is fictitious, Acme Corporation. It's like the cartoon movies, if you will, but not exactly that sort of company. But Acme is basically put together based on a synthesis of a number of companies that I've worked with over the years. And our protagonist over here, whose job it is to scale Agile at Acme Corporation, there's three of them. We have a ScrumMaster, his name is Tom. He's an awesome guy, he's been doing Agile for a while, expert, he's probably got the most Agile experience. We have Amber, she's the program management head, the PMO head. And we have Roy, who's the chief technology officer. And they're facing a dilemma because Roy's boss has just come to him, and I'm telling the story because this sort of happened a year and a half ago, and they have, Roy's boss comes and says, you need to cut time to market by 50%. So they set out, Acme Corporation set out on a goal to cut time to market by 50% over 3 years. When they first start, they don't have a clue as to how to do this stuff. They say, okay, well, we have these Agile projects out there. Let's go out and take a look at some of the frameworks, and then we're going to go along this path to agility. We have to, this goal to cut time to market by 50%. We're at different levels of the organization. We have Tom at the team level, we have Amber at the PMO level, and we have Roy at the executive level. And the first thing they do is to go out and take a look at the scaling frameworks. Again, from the version 1 survey, it turns out that there's this one technique called a Scrum of Scrums. Who's seen a Scrum of Scrums? Right? So Scrum of Scrums is where one or two people from each Scrum team get together and they have a cross-team collaboration meeting, cross-team communication meeting. It's not really a scaling framework per se, it's just a scaling technique. So that's the number one technique in use, according to this survey. Internally created methods is next, and then the Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFe, is third. Who's familiar with SAFe? Scaled Agile Framework, all right. So SAFe, if you lay it out, Tom and Amber and Roy sit down, and they say, okay, how do we lay this out? There's got to be some layers over here. Let's put together different charts. So they put a different view together, and they have a tiered view over here. So they have, at the team level, the methods that we saw, XP, Scrum, Kanban, that are being practiced at a team level. They got a Scrum of Scrums meeting, that's one level up from that. And then at the program level, we start to see these scaling methods show up. You have Scaled Agile Framework, large-scale Scrums, that's the last DAD, DAD stands for Discipline, Agile Delivery, and they have something called Nexus. Put all of these together, and they have some program techniques. There's also an Agile Program Management Office, and they find that Spotify, the music company, they have a scaling program technique as well. One level up, above multiple programs, you can pull them together in a portfolio, and SAFe and DAD both have techniques over there. So they say, oh, okay, all of this looks good, but as we go forward, we want to apply the Agile way of, test and learn, inspect and adapt to our rollout as well. So they say, we're going to follow, Acme Corporation is going to follow an iterative scaling strategy. And in their strategy, they say, we will assess, kind of benchmark where we are, then we'll align, start some pilot projects, run those for some time, and then given that those pilots, if those things start to prove successfully, then we'll accelerate. Right? So assess, align, accelerate, and they'll do this over and over again. They also didn't want to do all projects in one big fell swoop because they have several hundred projects. So what they said is that they'll start here month 0 at the beginning with assessing, and then they will do 5 projects as a pilot project in the first 6 months. Then for an extended pilot for 12 months, for another 15 projects, and then they were saying if these things work, at every step they're going to check, they'll accelerate and then they'll progress and scale to the enterprise. Right? So that sounds like a good plan. So they say, okay, let's bring in an external consultant to get a neutral view and assess time to market. So first thing they want to do is because the boss had said, shorten time to market, let's figure out how good or how bad we are. So they have an external consultant come in, and the consultant pegs the time to market as very high. It turns out that at Acme Corporation, it's taking 3 times as long as their competitors to get anything done. Their time to market is 300% that of their competitors. So Roy turns to the team and he says, well, we got some good news. We know that we're world-class bad. So we can only get better from here. And of course, costs are high and customer satisfaction is low as well. So they say, well, now that we've assessed, we know we have this benchmark and it can only get better. Let's take our Agile teams and run them through. So the next stage in our process, assess, align, what they're going to do is to run some pilot projects. They choose to run 5 pilot projects, and on those 5 pilot projects, they want to baseline their process. Right? But in order to pick those pilot projects, they follow a very careful methodology. They don't want to pick the wrong projects. So what they do is they pick projects that are not too big, not too small. You look at that little diagram over there in the sweet spot. Somewhat critical, but not bleeding edge. They don't want anything that's not important because then people will say, well, what the heck, why would you do Agile on that? And then Roy goes out and gets budget and funding for training, coaching, and all that kind of stuff. Amber goes off and she works with the program management office. She works with her business customers, and they determine which project they're going to use, and they start to present and launch the projects. They also, within the group, they say, well, we need to follow a baseline process. And the baseline process over here is Scrum and XP. So they say, let's put Scrum and XP together. They have 2-week sprints. Every sprint has its, sprint planning meeting, review and retrospective, daily scrum. But they also pull in many engineering practices from Extreme programming. They have automated builds. They have some continuous delivery discipline, and they're also using tools to manage the delivery. Who has a process that looks somewhat like this? So baseline process looks good, so we can scale. They're also using user stories. So they run this for a while. They run this for 6 months, and they say, okay, how are we doing? They're getting positive, results and positive news from the pilot projects. After 6 months, it turns out the results are really good. Right? Time to market, how did they do? 70% dropped in time to market. Right? So they're looking at 70% drop in time to market. Costs are lower and customer satisfaction is doubled. Granted, this is only on 5 projects, but very, very good results. Right? So they say, okay, things are looking good. We're ready to scale. We're ready to accelerate. They say, well, all of the scaling frameworks, whether it's safe or bad or less, they follow some lean principles. So as they get ready to accelerate, what they're going to do is to put in place some key scaling fundamentals. And all of these fundamentals are, by the way, in that book that you got in that bag that says IBM. So the black bag that says IBM, if you look at that, you'll see this copy of these fundamentals in that book. But anyway, so these fundamentals say, limit work in process, grow small, stable teams, build a network of small teams, and manage the flow. So they say, okay, let's get started. By now they finished about 6 months or so, let's get started. The first thing they need to do is to limit work in process, not just at the project level, but at the portfolio level. So, anyone know which city this is? Recognize the picture over there? It's Atlanta, and this is like close to downtown Atlanta at rush hour. Who has driven recently on a highway like this in their own city during rush hour? All right, you guys know what this looks like. What happens is that whether we're talking about a project portfolio or a highway like this, once enough cars get onto the highway, once the utilization of that highway goes beyond the 80% threshold, and you look at that graph over there, the cycle time, the time it takes to go from point A to point B, goes up exponentially. This is why, you can see traffic increasing and it just kind of flows and you're okay. But once you go beyond the clogging point of 80%, the cycle time goes up exponentially, right? So Roy, Amber, and Tom look at this and say, okay, this is what's happening to our portfolio. We've got too many projects in our portfolio. Turns out they had 400 projects in their portfolio. They say, okay, we need to clean things up. The first thing we've got to do is to rebalance our portfolio, or realign the portfolio. So they look at the 400 projects and they find zombie projects. Who knows what a zombie project is? What is a zombie project? One that keeps sucking resources. The undead project never dies, goes on forever and ever, gets bigger and bigger, and you end up flushing money down the toilet. So they say, let's find all these zombie projects and drive a stake in their heart and get them off the highway, get them out of the portfolio. Because the lower the work in process, look at Little's law on the top right, the lower the work in process, the lower the cycle time, the faster we'll go. If you have less stuff, we'll go faster. Sort of counterintuitive. Let's take the large projects and break them down. Right? Let's break them down into smaller projects and we'll get everything moving quickly. So they say, okay, rebalanced portfolio now looks like this. They started out with 400 projects. They terminated and delivered 100 of them. But the remaining ones, they don't just start working on all of them together, they queue them up. So now Roy works with his business counterparts, with the CEO of the company, and they prioritize the top 100 projects. They're going to be working on that. That says work in process. The next 100 projects are queued up according to business priority, and then they got a backlog of 100 projects. Okay, this has been taking some time, things are moving along. So they said, now it's time to look at our teams. Let's look at our teams and look at how they're doing. Let's start growing more teams. We've gone beyond that initial pilot project. We need to spin up more teams, but let's do it intentionally and carefully. So they say, let's take this approach where we'll have stable teams, rather than putting teams together and then breaking them up when the project is done. Let's put together some stable teams and bring the work to the team. Rather than taking people to projects and then, terminating the team when the projects are over, let's bring the work to the team so they have stable teams. And there you see, from going from bottom to top, the backlog of work, the prioritized backlog, and each stable team working on no more than one project at a time. So team picks up a project, works on it, finishes it. Picks the next project, works on it, finishes it. Some of the more nimble teams said, well, what we can do is we can work on a release at a time, not just a project. We'll take a release from one project, work on it, finish it, take a release from another project, adjust, pivot, and more nimbly, work on that, finish it, and we'll move on. So this starts to get a lot of predictability. These are set up by business platform, and things are looking good. All right, they say, okay, now we have these stable teams. Our next job at Acme is to connect them together, to have a network of small teams. Let's take this up to the program level. So what they do is they say, well, you know, we have a bunch of teams, we have Scrum Masters, we have product owners, perhaps we should have a chief Scrum Master by business unit or by program. Perhaps we should have a product owner, a chief product owner. And let's put those folks together in what we call an Agile PMO, an Agile Program Management Office. And that's going to look like this. At the bottom level, you have these project teams, and then one or two people from those project teams are pulled into that middle level, which is called an Agile PMO, Agile or Lean Agile Program Management Office. One or two people from executives level are also pulled into the PMO, and this now becomes a program level cross-team functional group, right? So I'm going to show you a short video, and we're going to see one of these guys' teams in action, one of these Agile PMOs, and we're going to see what they look like.
Are there any other potential release changes that we need to
So is this, Jill, is this represent the reconfigured board? Is this the consolidation?
This is the consolidation, except I would say that everything from 417 is actually correct. This is not correct because we need more weeks over there.
So let's
I don't have
because I'd like to take 2 minutes to talk about that. Do we need any further updates in current direction from any of the groups represented?
probably how they need to go to the
Yeah.
Okay, so there you saw this cross-team, cross-project functional group. There were actually 17 waterfall projects, 17 waterfall teams, and 4 agile teams coming together, 1 or 2 representatives, not everybody from each team, 1 or 2 representatives coming together across the multiple projects, and they had this board. And the board helped them manage the flow of delivery, a flow of value across that 21 project team. And so, the board is actually called a portfolio alignment wall. And the way it works is that each column represents a time box or a sprint. Each row represents functionality that's moving across. Each card over there represents a feature. And then some of the cards have red dots. That basically means that each one of those cards, you look at one in the middle, it has 7 or 8 red dots. One over there maybe. And so those red dots indicate dependent teams. So that means in that month, let's say March, that feature, let's say a big advanced functionality of reporting, 7 or 8 teams have to get together. Names of the teams are written up there, and they're on that card. So now everybody knows the dependencies. This program management office meets once a week, and they're able to manage risk, track the flow of value up, over and above what's happening at the team level, right? So they put it together, they start tracking all this stuff across the teams, and things are starting to look good. So now the Acme Corporation has now reached the end, starting to sort of the end of the first rev of acceleration, and they say, let's look at the results. Results are really looking good. 40% across the board. They're looking at 100 projects, 40% across the board drop in time to market, 25% reduction in costs, and customer satisfaction up, right? So they say, okay, this is looking good, and then their next step was to take and launch a lean process improvement, a lean standard work framework, and start working with that. For you guys, what we're going to do is to take this out of the realm of the fictitious, somewhat fictitious, and bring it down to actual real-life scenarios over here. Who is looking at implementing scaled agile framework, the SAFe framework? Anything else? Disciplined agile delivery, or some of these other frameworks out there, large-scale Scrum. So whatever framework we're looking at implementing, this is what I want you guys to consider next. You now have a way to put in some building blocks, limit the working process, build those small stable teams, bring the work to the teams, and then scale them through an Agile PMO, and then track the work across the programs. So let's look at our frameworks again. At the team level, we have our Agile methods, Scrum, XP, Kanban. At the program and the portfolio level, we now have SAFe, DAD, LESS, and Nexus. And here is a chart that shows us exactly what SAFe, this is the other main sort of leading framework, scaling framework out there. SAFe is a short form for Scaled Agile Framework. And SAFe has 3 levels as well. At the bottom level, this is a bit of an eye chart. At the bottom level, you have Agile teams. And each team has its own backlog. And each team delivers to those backlog within iterations. Iterations are nothing but sprints. But the interesting thing is at the program level, these teams are combined into what's known as a release train. Well, our Agile PMO, known by another name, is now called a release train. Our chief ScrumMaster over there now becomes a release train engineer. This particular program, this particular release train has what they call a program backlog or a program increment that they'll deliver. So multiple teams combined into a program increment, into a release train, and a delivery. At the higher level, at the third level, you have a portfolio level. And at the portfolio level, they're doing the similar things about rebalancing the portfolio and taking a portfolio vision of what needs to be done. Right? So our building blocks have now prepared us for a team level, a program level, and a portfolio level within the Scaled Agile framework. So if you're looking at moving forward, here is another reference chart for you guys, and we'll make this presentation deck available to you. But in the right-hand column, you see all of the major frameworks, and you see the elements, the building blocks that we've talked about, mapped to those elements, right? As you move forward, I want to give you a summary and some next steps, right? So our summary is that when you do a scaling approach, you want to assess, align, and accelerate, and do that over and over again. So that's our overall scaling strategy. You want to start off with a few projects and roll them out in bigger and bigger chunks. That's called an incremental rollout. And when you do it, you want to apply the scaling fundamentals, which is limiting work in process, growing small stable teams, building a network of small teams, and managing the flow. All right, so I have a question for you guys. Who here are team level folks? Put your hands up. Team levels, Scrum Masters, developers, testers. Who here is middle management? Project managers, directors, VPs, and C-level folks. Anybody at the executive level? Okay, so whatever your role is, what you're going to see is some, over here on this slide, some guidance on how to move forward. If you're a team level person and you already know Scrum, go take an advanced ScrumMaster class. Take a Kanban class, learn more about limiting WIP and doing things with Kanban. Join a local Agile meetup, go talk to folks outside of your company. And read the free book. Which book? Where's the free book?
In your bag.
In your bag, there you go. You're already a winner, fantastic. Okay, if you're a middle management, person in middle management, you want to learn about Agile program management offices, you want to take some sort of basic training class like a ScrumMaster class, connect with Agile coaches either within your company or outside, and
Read the book.
read the free book. Okay. If you're at the executive level, what you want to do is to prepare that iterative scaling strategy, find a partner, and of course read the free book.
Or
right?
buy one for everyone in your organization.
You could, that's an idea, but you're already a winner, you can probably, and we have some free copies over here that you can, there's some remaining copies that Audrey will be giving out at the end, so you might be able to take some home. Okay, so before we leave, I want us to bring us full circle back to what we said was the goal of scaling Agile. Right? We said we want to scale Agile, we want to jumpstart Agile, but why are we going to do it? We want to do it because we said once we do it, our entire organizations will be able to pivot, change direction, respond to changing requirements, changing business needs, and also implement quickly. So again, I gave you the initial view into nationwide insurance. I also want to show you over here what can happen when these results are done at scale. By the way, these slides and the information comes directly from the Application Development Center, a VP who personally gave them to me. So here is the Application Development Center nationwide, where they're tracking the work of this over 100 teams. Like I said, at any point in time, you can go to this I forget which floor it is the 7th floor. 14th floor. And you can go to the 14th floor and across all of these major places, across this entire floor is all the work tracking all the programs. And then once these guys get done, this is the amazing slide. Look at these results. Employee engagement going up every year on those lean and agile projects for the past 7 years. Increasing engagement. People are happier, they feel more involved, they feel more thrilled to be a part, coming to work, engagement going up every year. Productivity increasing, benchmark to external benchmarks. 87% of production releases, better than industry averages. Defects, this one blows my mind. High and critical defect counts on 5-year positive trend. Look at that last one. 96% of releases have 0 defects. This is an insurance company. This is not Google, this is not Microsoft. This is an insurance company that's been able to implement with that level of quality, which means because they have so few defects, they have high quality, they have high speed. And then, icing on the cake, costs reduced by 20%. Right? So, if you put it all together, my advice to you is to start small, use the iterative scaling strategy, roll out in an incremental way, and roll out in waves. So I'm going to stop there and see what questions you guys have. Went through a bunch of stuff, and see what questions you have. Yes, sir?
Yeah. So, the way you spoke, it seemed like it was all scale that you have framework. What have been some other successful scaling models?
I'm sorry?
What other successful scaling models besides the scale that you have framework?
So if you're looking at scaling frameworks, this slide, if you open the book, it's in the book as well. These are the ones that are out there. So you have Scrums, Agile PMO, Spotify, and the ones in red are the larger frameworks. SAFe, DAB, Large Scale Scrum, and Nexus. And my perspective on this is that you're going to have to choose which one you implement. But whichever one you implement, if you follow the approach that I've laid out for you, you can have the building blocks, and then you can segue to using any one of those. Or you could build your own scaling app. Oh, yes, sir.
It was great to see, by the way, the successful path through, but I'm sure you've seen it where you try to do it and it fails. What would be some of those warning signs when you suddenly see you're on that agile scaling process and then all of a sudden, whoa, everything's falling apart? And we don't see the 50% decrease, it's actually
So I found that in order to scale successfully, you need 2 major things to come together. And usually it's an alignment of the stars. You need grassroots momentum. People need to buy into the stuff. And you need top-down support. And if you don't have both of those things, you're not going to be successful. And I don't want to discourage anybody, but you will be successful in pockets, but you're not going to get these type of scaled results at the type of scale that I've been showing you. You need people need to buy into it, the stuff at the grassroots, and executives need to support it, not kind of drive it down people's throats, but to support it and guide it and set these rules and enable the entire adoption. Then you'll be successful at scale. So if you look at that and you say, okay, if your executives don't support us, whether that's providing the training, providing the coaching, or removing obstacles, or allowing us to change the model to create these program and portfolio type structures, we won't be successful. If people are not enthused about it, and it's like, oh, I've been doing waterfall for the last 30 years, I'll do waterfall for the next 20 years. And then I'll go retire. So if people don't buy into that, then you won't be successful, even if your executives are. Make sense? Other questions? Yes, sir. This one, nationwide.
About 10 years, a little bit.
5 to 10 years? Yeah, almost 10 years. Yes, sir.
Are you measuring productivity? Is it cost in some kind of complexity output or business impact? And if it's business impact, how do you know it's not?
I think they're using the running tested features metric, where you can deliver functionality, and the amount of functionality that's delivered is benchmark as the level of productivity. Other questions? We must be done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.